Story 1. It all started when I was 18 and dealing with some serious health issues. For months, I'd been in and out of the with extreme pain, waiting for hours without seeing a doctor. It was frustrating and scary, to say the least. Finally, after what felt like forever, they figured out my gallbladder was the culprit and needed to be removed. So there I was, fresh out of surgery, barely able to walk on my own. My grandmother's old wooden cane became my constant companion. It wasn't your typical metal cane from the store. She'd made it herself from a tree that fell during a tornado. It meant a lot to me, especially since she'd used it until she passed away. Anyway, my husband and I decided to brave a trip to the store for some essentials. I started off using the cane, but soon realized I needed more support. That's when we opted for one of those mobility scooters they have at the front of the store. We were making our way through the aisles when I noticed this woman following us. I didn't think much of it at first, figuring she was just shopping in the same direction. But then I stood up to grab some chips, and all hell broke loose. This lady, let's just call her Karen, came charging around the corner like she'd been waiting for this moment. Karen, you should be ashamed of yourself. Taking away a disabled cart when you're not even disabled. Me, excuse me. If you look in the basket, you'll see my cane. I am disabled at the moment and need this scooter. Karen, oh, please, that's not a real cane. It's just a stick. I tried to explain about my grandmother's cane, but she wasn't having any of it. Me, look, I need to find my husband and give him these chips. Can you please let me sit back down? Karen, you're fine. You're young and healthy. You don't need a scooter. You're just too lazy to walk. At this point, I was in serious pain from standing so long. I even offered to show her my surgery scars, but she just kept blocking my way to the scooter. Luckily, my husband showed up just in time. Husband, what's going on here? Honey, are you okay? Me. This woman won't let me sit down. She thinks I'm faking being disabled. Husband, ma'am, my wife just had surgery. She's in a lot of pain and needs to sit down. Please move aside. Karen's face went white as a sheet when she realized she'd messed up. She shuffled away without another word, but I could feel her eyes on us for the rest of our shopping trip. As we were checking out, I noticed Karen at the customer service desk, gesturing wildly and pointing in our direction. The store manager approached us, looking concerned. Manager, excuse me, but we've had a complaint about misuse of our mobility scooters. Could you please explain your situation? My husband started to get angry, but I put a hand on his arm to calm him down. Me, of course. I recently had gallbladder surgery and am still recovering. I have my cane with me, but sometimes I need more support. I'd be happy to show you my medical documents if necessary. The manager's expression softened immediately. Manager, that won't be necessary. I'm sorry for the inconvenience. Is there anything we can do to make your shopping experience more comfortable? I glanced over at Karen, who was watching the exchange with a mix of disbelief and embarrassment. Me, actually, yes. Could you perhaps put up a sign reminding people that not all disabilities are visible? It might help prevent misunderstandings like this in the future. The manager nodded enthusiastically, thanking me for the suggestion. As we left the store, I caught one last glimpse of Karen. She was slinking away, her face redder than the Walmart logo. I couldn't help but feel a tiny bit satisfied that she'd learned a valuable lesson about making assumptions. That experience taught me a lot about standing up for myself, even when it's uncomfortable. And you know what? I still think about it sometimes, wondering if that sign ever made a difference for someone else in my situation. Story 2. This happened several years ago. I was a photographer for a major theme park and have dealt with my fair share of entitled Karensbrads. But there's only been one time I've had to call security because of a Karen. I was working with a character one afternoon, and one of the families that stopped by to pay a visit was this family of 3 with mom, dad, and a 5-year-old boy that I'll name Malcolm. Malcolm is strapped to a harness attached to mom's waist. Think those jogging harnesses for blind runners to keep him close to mom and dad. Before the session, Dad pulled the character attendant and me aside and alerted us that Malcolm was a nonverbal autistic and camera flashes were overstimulating to him. Now this was a pretty common request, so I adjusted my settings so I wouldn't have to use the flash, and thanked him for alerting me. It's Malcolm's turn, and he was such a sweetheart. He just wanted to show off the book full of pictures of his favorite dinosaurs, and we all got sad when he had to leave. A few hours later, I was in an area we refer to as backstage, where guests aren't allowed heading to my break. Imagine my surprise when all of a sudden I get body slammed by Malcolm. For the record, I'm almost 6 feet and 250 pounds, and he nearly managed to knock me over. He's screaming and crying. Fortunately, my manager, Oscar, was nearby, so I flagged him down, and we immediately called security. We get Malcolm to a cool air-conditioned place as it's 95°F, and I looked up pictures of dinosaurs on my phone to show Malcolm. Eventually, he calmed down, and he essentially became my little buddy. About 10 minutes later, Malcolm is reunited with a tearful mom and dad. It's there we got the full story. Enter Karen. Mom, Dad, and Malcolm were getting ice cream when Karen approached. The conversation went roughly as followed. Karen, why is he harnessed? Mom, oh, he's autistic, and he will bolt if he's not harnessed. Karen, no, he's not. Mom, excuse me? Karen, you're just a bad parent. My grandson knows better than to stray from me, and he's about the same age. Mom, I'm sorry, but he's incapable of understanding that. It's safer for everyone if he is harnessed. It's at this point that Dad comes back with the ice cream, and Mom turns her attention away to help him. The next thing she knows, the harness goes slack. When she looked up, Malcolm and Karen are gone. It's so packed that day that it's easy to lose track of someone, especially if it's a running child. An important thing to note is that the park has cameras everywhere, so it was easy to get a video of the incident and get a description of Karen. Security was alerted and Karen tracked down. She was belligerent and tried to slap the security guard who stopped her, stupidly doing it in front of an sheriff. So she got a lovely court date for assault as a result. Malcolm and his family were given an extra day added to their tickets as an apology for what happened, but they just had one request. They asked to know where I would be the next day so I could take their pictures. The next day, I gave them a full-on photo shoot, and yes, it was the best day of my entire career. Story 3. The shelter I've been working at for a couple of years now is over 30 years old and is quite notorious for keeping things that way. The daily notes are physically kept in binders. 1980s-style punitive measures are imposed on clients in conflict, and the electrical panels are labeled with cards that went through a typewriter. You get the idea. The floor supervisor over 20 years in that position emphasized that even though jeans were allowed, we needed to strictly adhere to the dress code. That meant button-up or collared shirts, no logos, only long pants or dresses, no hats unless you're outside, no visible tattoos, etc. In other words, dress nothing like the vast majority of the people we serve. We're meant to dress the way they should aspire to dress, said the supervisor. I was told other staff, including staff above my pay grade, have long hated the dress code and unsuccessfully tried to change it for years. None of them were bold little troublemakers like me. Given my previous experience with underserved populations, I also knew this was a terrible idea. Generally speaking, what people in these communities lack in financial resources, they make up for in their abilities to read people and navigate emotions. If they think you're an authority figure or acting inauthentic, many will outright write you off. And for the most part, they have a great social or emotional radar. The dress code said men's shirts must have visible buttons or a collar. I sewed 2 buttons near my hip on a plain t-shirt and wore it in. They said nothing the first time, but had a meeting where they weren't pointing out anyone in particular and updated that specific part of the policy to prevent me from doing it again. Next, I wore capris. After all, nothing about pant length was mentioned either. That time, the code was updated, and we were informed via email. Still, no one-on-one conversation about it. A few months and minor malicious compliances later, Our workplace gave us logoed t-shirts with the institution's name and website on them. Hooray, we thought. We will at least be able to wear t-shirts now. Nope. After a week of several coworkers wearing the shirts they gave us, we got an organization-wide email that the shirts did not comply with the dress code and should not be worn during work hours. Knowing me as the office rabble-rouser, several upset coworkers came to me independently to ask how they too could rebel. Enter this story's biggest malicious compliance. As a minimalist, I had no desire to hold onto a shirt that I would not wear. We had no input on the design nor color of the shirts, and I simply did not need it taking up space in my closet. The most reasonable alternative would be to turn the shirt back in and explain that, so I did. Coworker number 1 was moving soon and didn't need an extra thing to pack, so she also turned hers in. Coworker number 2's partner hated dark green, the shirt's color, so he turned his in. This happened all the way to 25 total employees, with some borrowing others' excuses. After 5 days, the supervisor had a box with 24 shirts sitting in his tiny office. He actually has to keep them on his desk, and I can hear him bumping his hand against them when he uses the mouse. 3 months later, they are still there. He's not dumb. He knows those shirts are a forget you that lives in his office. He cannot donate them to the shelter due to some other ridiculous handbook rule about organizational spending, and he bikes 6 miles to work, so driving them home isn't a reasonable option. He's tried putting them in general office storage, but his boss has said the shirts are the supervisor's problem since he ordered them. Currently, he's just stuck. We know it bothers him, but he knows he can't bring it up since it's his own rules that prevent us from wearing them. No dress code changes so far, but the top-of-the-year meeting regarding our handbook has a dress code on the table. 3 of the people who returned shirts are a part of that advisory board of 5. I'm cautiously optimistic that we'll finally be rid of some of the dumb, short-sighted elements of our dress code come February. Story 4. A bit of backstory and information. I'm 25, female, and 5'3". In April, I suffered an accident that resulted in fractured vertebrae, the 12th thoracic vertebra, the 1st lumbar vertebra, and the 3rd lumbar vertebra. I've always had horses in my life since I was around 7 years old. Recently, I made my dream come true by adopting my first wild horse, a Mustang. His name is Apollo, and he's the star of my accident, which I'll explain in the story. Since April 11th, I've been wearing a back brace, which I had to keep on until late August. It was one of the hardest things I've ever gone through, and it's still difficult. Before the accident, I was always active, working and training horses, lifting feed, and doing outdoor tasks in the mountains. But after the accident, I was basically confined to my bed and couch, with strict limits: no bending, twisting, or lifting. This experience was incredibly challenging and depressing, not just for me, but for everyone who helped me during my recovery. This isn't my first experience dealing with a demanding, entitled person, unfortunately. By the time this story happened, I'd been out of the brace for 3 weeks. I was still far from fully recovered, just beginning to walk on my own without a walker or chair, and very out of shape. I had to rest often. One day, while shopping with my family, I reached a point where I couldn't keep walking. After about 10 to 15 minutes, I found a chair in the store to sit and wait for them. I had reached my limit and needed a break. This is where the story really begins. I'd been sitting peacefully, listening to my music with wireless headphones, for a few minutes when a lady came over and stood by the chair I was sitting in. There are always a few chairs on display in this store, and customers can sit on them. I didn't think much of her presence and just kept looking at my phone, scrolling through Facebook and answering messages from people asking how I was doing. Little did I know, I was unknowingly provoking this wild Karen. Now, my music wasn't loud enough to bother anyone, but I soon heard her tapping her foot, sighing, and huffing loudly. Eventually, I glanced up for a split second and saw her, a full-blown Karen in all her entitled glory. As quick as my glance was, she saw me look up, and it seemed like she had been watching me for a while. Seeing me acknowledge her, she decided to act. Karen wanted me to move. I didn't. The same old story we've all heard before with entitled people. We went back and forth, just like in those stories you read. But then things took a turn. She tried to pull me out of the chair. Now, because of my back, I can't get up or sit down quickly. I have to move in a very specific way to avoid pain or further injury. If she pulled me up, it could cause serious harm, possibly even paralyze me. There was no way I was going to let that happen. She grabbed me and started pulling. I felt a sharp pain and instinctively reacted by slapping her. She paused for a moment, clearly shocked, but still didn't let go. Instead, she became even angrier and started yelling at me. "How dare you slap me, you lazy, ungrateful teenager," she continued ranting while trying to pull me up again. This time, I punched her. Before she could say anything else, I spoke up. "If you try to pull me up again, or even touch me, I'll call the police. I won't hesitate to defend myself. You're harassing me, and I'm protecting myself. I'm not moving until my family is done shopping. They're shopping for me because I can't. I'm recovering from multiple fractures in my spine, and I'm not lazy." She finally let go, but still wasn't done. "Recovering, yeah, right? You won't need to walk anymore because you'll be arrested soon. You just assaulted me." I laughed, still sitting comfortably in the chair. "You'll be the one facing charges, not me. I got bucked off my horse, and the fall fractured my back. No, I'm not paralyzed, but I will be if you try to pull me again. So don't touch me." For some reason, she was still standing there, with a bloody nose from the punch, surprisingly quiet. I assumed she was thinking of her next move. I looked around the store, but it was busy, with long lines and workers unloading trucks, so no one was nearby to help. Then, out of nowhere, she decided to insult my horse. "Well, if you were a good rider, you wouldn't have fallen. And if he was a good horse, he wouldn't have bucked you off. You should give him to me. I've always wanted a horse. That will be your apology for assaulting me. Hand him over today." This comment caught me off guard. I was stunned for a moment before I could respond. "You can mess with me, but if you mess with my horses or threaten them, Mama Bear comes out. They're like my kids, and I'm protective of them. No, you're not getting anything from me. He's a wonderful horse, I'm a good rider, and you're completely out of your mind. He's a mama's boy and only trusts me right now. His saddle broke, which was why I came off. It was his fourth ride, and everything was fine until a dog spooked him. He bucked a few times, and I fell off. It wasn't anyone's fault. The ride had gone perfectly before that." "You couldn't handle him," I added, as she tried to interrupt. "He's still legally owned by the Bureau of Land Management, and you can't take him. And yes, I know you can't handle him because when the paramedics came to get me after my accident, he charged at the group of men from the fire truck and ambulance multiple times to protect me. Apollo is 3 years old and massive. She tried once again to pull me up, either to take the chair or to make me stop talking. I punched her again. At that point, the store manager came running over from the back. She had seen my last punch and stopped to assess the situation. "What's going on here? Are you okay?" she asked me, knowing about my back injury. Karen jumped in before I could respond. "She slapped me, punched me, and verbally assaulted me. I want her kicked out, the cops called, and I want my shopping comped." The manager just looked at Karen, then at me. "I'll be right back. I'm going to check the security cameras." She turned to Karen and said, "You come with me." Karen turned ghostly pale. The manager came back shortly after, and the police were called. Karen was placed in the police car, and she was banned from the store. All was good in the end. It wasn't the worst encounter I've ever had, but for me, it was terrifying to be that close to being paralyzed by a stranger. When we finally checked out, the store comped our shopping, and the manager even put together a gift bag for me for my horse, Apollo, to use the next time I came in. Story 5. I finished a workout and wanted to treat myself to happy hour because physical exertion means I can drink alcohol with no consequences. My happy hour bar, you know you have one, was hella crowded, but I found a seat at the bar. About 2/3 RDS of the way through my IPA, I realized I really had to pee. As I took my sweet time deciding if it was really worth getting up to use the bathroom, an entire family-sized family moved into the table behind me. I'm not totally sold on the logic of trying to find a table for 25 at a popular bar during happy hour, but I sincerely applauded their optimism. Unfortunately, while they'd managed to manifest a table, they'd failed to ask the universe for an appropriate number of chairs. Grandma somehow got the short straw there, although given how she behaved, I'm not remotely shocked that she raised a family who would let the matriarch stand. Anyway, I finally decided that I could either give in and use the bathroom or embarrass myself, so I prepared to get up. I ordered another beer. I plopped a coaster on top of it. I left my phone beside my glass. I did a weird hand gesture at the bartender who gave me a thumbs up. Short of putting a cardboard cutout of myself in my seat, I could not have made it any clearer that I was planning on returning. I leave with a sense of nervousness, though, and relieved myself as quickly as I could without alarming my bladder. Not fast enough, though. I returned to see Grandma moving my goddamn seat, like standing there with her hands on my chair, starting to pick it up and move it to her table. "Hi, excuse me, that's my seat," I exclaimed in my best customer service voice. She looked at me. "I don't have a chair." I told her I'm sorry about that I was not, but I was currently using the one in her hands, so she'd need to find a different solution. "I don't have a chair," she repeated, so I got into Groundhog Day mode, too. Then she shifted. She didn't think I was coming back, so she assumed she could have my seat. I asked her what made her think I wasn't returning, the coaster over my beer, or my phone sitting beside my glass. Like, I would rather leave my arm behind than my phone. So let's get stop lying, you lying liar face. Grandma's family just sat silently behind her, looking like they were praying for the meteor, which makes me think that Grandma tries to steal chairs on the regular. She repeated, "I don't have a chair." "No," I said, "you do not." And I took my chair from her hands and returned to my drink. Story 6. Well, I guess this is the place to talk about this because people here seem to have grown up in healthy families. Whenever I tell that to my friends, some of them will say, "That's what moms do," and one of them even tells me I'm a coward because he didn't even have a mom growing up, has passed away when he was born, and I should put up with it. Now, some full backstory. I'm the younger child of my moms who had 4 children. I have an older sister and twin middle sisters. Growing up, I used to be a complicated child. My sister would always get compliments about their grades and behavior at school, whereas I was always struggling with school. Well, my mom thought I was some kind of genius because I learned how to speak and read really fast, speaking at 15 months old and reading at 3, so she consulted with a lot of schools, and eventually one of them accepted me at the age of 5, skipping 2 years of preschool. At the beginning, it was okay, because a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old are not so different in their interests. But when I got to higher levels, it started to get troubling. The content of classes was not of my interest, so this is what went wrong with school. Besides, at age 11, I was diagnosed with ADHD. I had to take medicine to help me go through school properly. The medicine I took was really strong, and it had me emotional most of the day. I was bullied for crying over small things, and having no appetite was an issue, because I hate my body. I hated being a skinny kid. I wanted to be chubby, because I always saw chubby people as more attractive. That's my thing. It got worse. I entered high school at the age of 13, whereas all the other teenagers were 15 or so. So, while I was worried about the next Power Rangers season and rewatching all the seasons of Digimon, they were all thinking about girlfriends, their first alcohol shots, and even drugs. Needless to say, I had no friends at all at high school and a lot of bullies. I joined college at age 16. My mother was really proud because my sisters didn't do it in the first attempt. All of them had to join private universities because they couldn't get to a public one. But that's the problem here. I was 16, had no childhood because I had no friends at all growing up, and there I was in a room full of people who were over 20 years old. My whole class hates me because I was too immature to be there. Well, this was also the year my mom found out I'm gay. She gave me a call, telling me she had the biggest disappointment of her life. I was a curse, and that I should have died when I was 2. I choked on a plastic flower for 2 hours or so, before someone could remove it so I could breathe. My relationship with her never got back from that. Ever since, she refused for paying for my medicine, even though I was unemployed and, well, I see a lot of stories here about people who started working really soon. But I live in Brazil, and the law here is that teenagers under 18 can't work, and if they do, the employer might get in trouble. So, I had no money and my ADHD kicked in from there. I managed to get through the first 3 years of college very well. I didn't fail any disciplines except for one which I failed because attendance. My mom took me to her house in another city at the beginning of the semester and refused to send me back sooner alone, which caused me to lose 3 weeks of class, which was worth 24 absences, when the failing cap was 21. But from the 4th year on, I had problems with my attention to the subjects. I study veterinary medicine, and from the 4th year on the subjects start getting very specific. For example, we had faux study medical clinic for equestrians and bovines. I hate studying horses and bulls, so it was difficult. I have been failing at least one subject for the past 6 years. Next year I'll be there for 11 full years without graduating. Thanks untreated ADHD, you rock. I have seen all of my friends graduate, yet here I am still a year away from my graduation if I pass all the subjects. My failures didn't bother me at all in the beginning. I was young and started way too soon. It was okay if I had to wait a few more years to graduate. My best friend also finished, and she helps me a lot with doubts from difficult subjects. The problem is, my mom hates when I fail, and every time she heard I failed, she would go on a rant for hours, calling me useless, lazy, and retarded. She loves telling me how incompetent I am, that if I listened to her advice, I would be a God's man and a successful person. It's one of her favorite. She also likes to call me stupid and tell me that me being gay is the problem, because I don't hide my sexuality. She proceeds to yell about how she sacrificed her youth to raise 4 children alone. She divorced my father when I was 3, and how she's tired of working to keep my luxury. Now here, keep in mind that mom earns $7,000 a month and spends like $200 with me when I need something like new clothes or food that she offers herself to buy for me. I do have a small job now and pay for most of my stuff, and we share the bills. I pay internet and water. She pays light. We don't have gas bills in Brazil. She's constantly reforming our house, changing things. She recently bought a new car, even though we already have 2, and spends around $500 with her hair every 2 weeks. Yet she insists I spend all of her money. Besides, she didn't live with me until this year's May. That's when she got a job in my city and came to live with me. It didn't go well. The humiliating speeches have been on since 2013, when I joined college, and it continues to this day. So, after the pandemic, I haven't been feeling well. I was worried that I was getting depressed and wanted to see a psychologist or psychiatrist, but my mom just said I should pray to God to set free of it and refused to believe me that it was that serious. So, in the last month, my life got a terrible turn. My boyfriend broke up with me. My anxiety was kicking in to the point my blood pressure would blast off at the minimum sign of stress. College was not going well, and my mom being here, constantly humiliating and degrading me, was not helping. So at the end of semester I fail another subject. I know my mom's here and she won't let it pass. I can't help but have a panic attack and start crying. I cry so hard I start coughing, and I cough so hard I vomit. The desperation gets to the point when I think I would rather take my life than spend another year in failure and humiliation. So I take a full bottle of pills and lay down, waiting for it to be over. It doesn't work, and my sisters are worried about me. The panic attack is over, and I start thinking better about it, and it hits me that I didn't have a reason to do that. Besides, I was not ready to keep hearing my mother's humiliation over and over again. I decide I will not let her speak to me or my sisters like that ever again. You might think that was the story, right? Well, it wasn't. The important part of the story is what happened last week. My mom decided to take my medical history to the university and ask for the support of my teachers. Now that she sees that college almost had me done with my life, they say it's all set, but they need to meet with me before they proceed. I attended a meeting with my courses coordinator and with a psychologist from CSI Center of Support to Inclusion. As soon as I entered the psychologist office, she didn't mind me. I tell her, "Hi, I'm Op. I'm studying vet school and I have a DHD. She doesn't seem impressed by this part, and then I say the magic words, "I'm my mom's son." As soon as she hears my mother's name, something snaps inside of her. She immediately tells me to sit down and tells her assistant to leave the room because she needs to talk to me in private. So, Op, let me ask you, did you refuse to accept you have a DHD? What took you so long to bring your medical history? I'm shocked and I reply, I thought my mom had it brought before because I was a minor when I joined. Well, your mom came in here with a very weird story, saying you tried to Kais because of what a teacher said. She also mentioned the bad influence of a friend, a boyfriend, and the problems you had with your father. Oh, well, I never told my mom those were the reasons for my attempt to KMS. The teacher talked to me 2 days after the attempt. He had nothing to do with it. And he only told me that there was no possible way I could recover my lost grades, so it was failing or failing. She also blames my best friend because when I met her, she didn't find the way my mom treated me up until my 20s. She treated me like a child, like I had no permission to sleep over or to go anywhere with my friends without her knowing. My friend told me I should cut the umbilical cord, and she was right. When my mom stopped treating me like that, I felt way better. My ex-boyfriend was not a problem at all. We broke up on good terms, although I still miss him to this day, but it was not reason enough for me to try to KMS. I haven't spoken to my father for 4 years now. We had a complicated relationship because my father left me really soon in my life, as I said, the age of 3, and he never tried to be close to me or my sisters. He used to pay for child support, but then in the middle of the pandemic, with me having serious economic problems, he sued me to stop paying for child support, even though I was still in college in Brazil. The law is that you pay it until your kid graduates or turns 24. I was 23 during pandemic. I would be okay with that, because I did have a job and I could spare a little. But he had just engaged with a woman who had a 3-year-old son, and when I visited them, I saw the kid with a tablet, a video game, his own cell phone with internet, a ton of automatic toys and etc. To help you with the math, my child support was $500. The tablet his stepson was holding is around $19. So, well, he couldn't afford to pay $500 support to me, but he could buy a tablet which was 4 times this value to the other boy. I don't hate the boy, just my father. I actually helped taking care of him and played with him a lot when I visited, because I really like children. I might be jealous because my father is giving him what he never gave me, but I have no hard feelings against him. It's not his fault that my father prefers to give support to another man's child instead of his own. This also includes my sisters who never had anything but child support from him. That was the last I heard from my father, and it bothered me to the point I changed my name. I was a junior, I'm not anymore. Well, those are all different things in which I didn't think a bit while attempting against my life. The psychologist hears it all, and she is gagged. When she asks about my relationship with my mother, I say it's complicated, and as she keeps asking deeper questions, I tell her everything I told you above. The psychologist asks me if I have already told her about my feelings when I tried to KMS. I say that not yet, and she's worried. She says my mom also needs therapy because she can't take the blame for her actions. All the pressure and humiliation she has put me through needs to be worked on. I left the office impressed with what my mom can make up to get rid of her guilt, but I'm not surprised. My mom never really apologized for her mistakes with anyone, neither me, nor my sister, nor anyone in our family. She always blames it on someone or something else, and says she wouldn't have done it if another person had done something different. P.S. Well, yesterday, I did tell my mom that she was the reason I attempted to KMS, not in a gentle way. She had a tooth surgery, and my sister spent the whole week taking care of her. Yesterday, my sister wanted to see a friend, and she freaked out about it, calling my sister a party goer and irresponsible. I replied that she deserved it. But my mom said I shouldn't say anything since much like her I am, guess what? Useless and unwanted. So I proceeded to tell, go ahead, say that. Next week you can lie to the psychologist about it to get rid of your guilt of when I tried Sui. I didn't try to do it because of anyone but you. Yet here you are repeating the same things you did for all those years until it almost killed me. She started crying and isolated herself for the whole day. She didn't speak to me until now. She went on a trip to her birthplace with my sister, and they will be back only next week. I don't know how things are going to be when they come back.